The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has been working on an initiative called Engineering with Nature. It all started in 2010. And this is the EWN Podcast. EWN is developing and implementing nature-based solutions for water and infrastructure projects. It's bringing together a growing international community of scientists, engineers, and researchers from all kinds of disciplines that are committed to harnessing the power of nature to solve problems. The EWN Podcast tells their stories. Now here's your host, Sarah Thorne of Decision Partners.
Well, with September well underway, we're kicking off the second half of Season 6 of the Engineering with Nature podcast. Welcome to Episode 5. I'm here with Jeff King, National Lead of the Engineering with Nature program, and we're talking about the summer of 2023 and what the Engineering with Nature team's been working on and what's ahead for the Engineering with Nature program. Jeff, it was truly an unprecedented summer in many places around the world. I think Mother Nature certainly demonstrated that climate change is upon us.
Yes, I'd say so too. We've seen and experienced the effects of climate change in so many places around the world. On our last episode, Season 6, Episode 4, we had a really interesting conversation with Annabella Boneta. She's the Manager and Research Associate at the Intact Center for Climate Adaptation at the University of Waterloo in Ontario, Canada, and an expert in forest fires. And we were talking about the record-breaking wildfire season in Canada. We had 1,000 active wildfires with 660 classified as out of control. And Canada continues to experience the worst wildfire season ever. In fact, the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Center reports that as of September 10th, over 17 million hectares have burned, more than doubles the previous record of 7.1 million hectares set in 1995. To put all this into perspective, 17 million hectares over 65,000 square miles. That is larger than the state of Wisconsin. We've also seen the devastating wildfires that destroyed Lahaina, Hawaii on August 8th, which has become the deadliest wildfire in the U.S. in over a century. It has been a very tough time for all of those whose lives have been touched by the unprecedented wildfires, those who have lost loved ones, those who are fighting the fires, and those who have been affected by the smoke.
It certainly has. So many people in North America and Europe and other places around the world have been affected by the wildfires and the extreme heat this year. And we've also seen extreme rainfall and flooding, certainly the Canadian and U.S. Northeast, South California, Florida, and many of the southern states.
Indeed, we've done several podcast episodes on California, which has been experiencing extreme drought, followed by extreme flooding for decades and even perhaps centuries. Tropical Storm Hillary in August, for example, caused unprecedented flooding and broke many rainfall records. Imagine 11.74 inches of rain in 48 hours in Riverside County, California. That's incredible. Hurricane Idalia made landfall along the Big Bend in Florida as a powerful Category 3 hurricane at the end of August. And as we tape this episode, we're watching Hurricane Lee off the east coast of the U.S. Certainly people in all parts of the U.S. and Canada and around the world have and continue to experience the effects of climate change firsthand. There's the unprecedented heat, extreme ocean temperatures, rain, flooding, and forest fires.
Indeed, it's truly been a global wake-up call. Understanding the impacts of climate change and taking action to adapt is certainly on the top of the agenda for many organizations and individuals, which brings us to the Engineering with Nature program that you lead. We're going to catch up with a couple of your colleagues, Jeff, but before we do, maybe you can talk about what the EWN program has been working on.
So EWN's program focus, we've been focused on the integration of nature-based solutions to help address the climate change imperative, particularly as it affects our mission space. Things like modernizing infrastructure, navigation, flood risk management, looking at coastal restoration, opportunities for supporting resilient communities. We have 49 active ERDIC-led projects underway currently within the program, many of which are really innovative.
49 is quite a precedent. Can you share a couple of examples with us, Jeff?
Yes, Sarah, it keeps us very, very busy. Picking up on our discussion of wildfires, for example, we have a project led by our colleague Eileen Glenn in the Geotechnical and Structures Lab at ERDIC. She's looking at how to improve soil performance after intense wildfires that can accelerate erosion and lead to flooding. As another example, our project near Boston, it's focused on enhancing the resiliency of urban marshes, and they've made good progress over the summer. They are, in fact, working with partners to enhance the biodiversity and habitat in the area, including that of the salt marsh sparrow, which is a threatened and endangered species.
Yes, our Engineering with Nature colleague Andrew McQueen and I talked briefly about the Bell Island project in Season 6, Episode 2, when we had Joe Christo from the Stone Living Lab in Boston on as a guest.
That's fantastic. That was a really interesting episode. And I don't want to spill the beans here or anything, but the principal investigator, Alan Kennedy, he and his colleagues are moving ahead with their work on 3D printing of natural materials.
That's great. We talked with Al Kennedy and Zach McClellan and Burton Sudell in Season 5, Episode 1 about how they were starting to investigate the potential of using 3D printing to create nature-inspired structures like coral reefs.
Oh, yes. And in fact, they are moving ahead and planning their first technical workshop in early 2024. And at that workshop, they'll explore the potential of 3D printing for nature-inspired infrastructure. And that really just sort of encapsulates all that's going on. I'm sure we'll be talking about all of these projects and many others on future episodes of the EWN Podcast.
I sure look forward to doing so. We've got so many brilliant multidisciplinary teams collaborating on engineered nature projects, and we want to hear about as many of them as we can, which is a great lead into our first guest and the work that she does to support the program. Jeff, I was so happy to finally have our colleague Courtney Chambers on the podcast. Courtney's the communications lead for the Engineering with Nature program, and we work really, really closely with her. The truth is, I don't think we could do the podcast without her.
Yeah, Sarah, I totally agree. Courtney does an amazing job as a communication lead, and the importance of her role to the podcast, to the EWN program. It's great that you have a chance to have her come on and talk about it.
Well, take a listen. Here's our conversation. So, Courtney, thanks for dropping into the studio.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm really happy to be here.
I think it would be really great if we could start by getting you to talk a little bit about your role on the Engineering with Nature leadership team, and then we can talk about what you've been working on, which I know has been a lot over the summer.
I'm responsible for sharing the incredible work that our project teams and our collaborators are doing within the Engineering with Nature program and as part of this broader movement that so many have contributed to make this successful already and is growing as we speak. So when I started this role, though, as the communications lead, we were moving fast, and it was 2021 at the time, and Atlas 2 was about to launch, and then the international guidelines were coming. And at one point in a hurry, I allowed the grammar check on my computer to make a correction for me. And it turned that capital W from Engineering with Nature into a lowercase w. And as you might imagine,
not good
at all. This was a really big deal. And fortunately, we caught this, sadly, more than once, but we did catch it. But in that process of getting used to the pace of things and getting things out, it really sunk into me that capital W was a big deal for more than one reason. And it wasn't just about brand identity, but it sank in that this W is a fundamental element of the Engineering with Nature idea. And so in reflection on that, it made me realize that it helped emphasize that collaboration and partnership, of course, are a critical part of this approach. Engineering with Nature, by definition, requires collaboration across sectors and disciplines and jurisdictions. And by working with one another, we benefit from the wealth of knowledge and expertise, as well as the authorities and the influences beyond our own. And this allows us to address really complex challenges more effectively.
Absolutely. And I have to tell you, from the very early days as we were doing the initial development of the whole idea of engineering with nature, that was a kind of a critical, strategic, pivotal moment when we decided as a group that the with was going to be how we put engineering and nature together, and that the with had to be capitalized. We had a few fights with the grammar police and the editors, as you could imagine.
Yes.
But we prevailed.
You did. So, well done. Yes.
Yeah.
And it says a lot. That capital W says a lot. And I've really come to appreciate what that means.
Absolutely. So while the Engineering with Nature podcast took a little break in August, I know that you've been really busy over the whole summer. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about some of the critical things you've been working on.
Certainly. Yeah, it's been a busy and productive time. I'll call attention to a few of the highlights, and I can tell you a little bit more about them. But we recently published the capstone report on our comprehensive benefits research, which you've heard a couple of different events and publications that have all contributed towards this capstone effort. We've also been diligently working on the EWN Atlas Volume 3, which is capturing the essence of nature-based collaboration through image. And Volume 3 is set to be released in early 2024. And these books, if you've seen Atlas 1 or 2, hopefully, you know that these books really showcase the potential for engineering with nature and the diversity that can include. So we have a team working hard on that. I guess the other one I'll mention is that the EWN strategic plan that will carry us to 2030 is also in the works.
Well, let's talk about these. They are all really important, and the whole point of your role is to help share the stories of all of the brilliant scientists, engineers, landscape architects, all the collaborators, to share the stories of the Engineering with Nature projects that they're working on, so that they inspire others to do projects like this, right?
Yes. Well, and that was another thing that I was thinking about, kind of in the connection to the collaboration being so fundamental to engineering with nature.
Right.
Back to like my role and what I get to contribute to that is communication, I feel like, is the bridge and the invitation for others to collaborate. So from the beginning, as you shared, communication was highly prioritized in engineering with nature as an approach. And by documenting lessons learned, by hosting dialogue, sharing ideas, workshopping new ideas, and then promoting our findings, we've created an opportunity for others to join in and contribute to this more resilient way of doing business and enjoying broader benefits as a result. So that's what I see communication adding to this conversation and to the approach of engineering with nature. These projects certainly advance that.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about the atlases. We have 2 atlases out. The first one was really an opportunity to try and document and share what is being done in engineering with nature, the different kinds of projects, really the scope of different kinds of projects that are happening, not just led by the Army Corps of Engineers, but led by others around the world. That was so successful. I remember the launch of the first atlas. You went on and did a second one. Now you're working on the third. Talk a little bit about the atlases, because I think they become just a critical communications tool for the whole Engineering with Nature program.
They really have been. And they were a pretty novel approach in that as traditional research organization working or sitting at the Engineer Research and Development Center, it's our job to produce technical material and guidelines and guidance and findings, and that's a crucial component of building infrastructure that's going to serve its purpose. And so that's huge. And so that's so much of what the Research and Development Center does. But these books, if you've not seen them, they're more like a coffee table book. And so they're bigger. They're very visually stunning. They have big pictures. They have icons that help you quickly identify the types of benefits that are achieved through the various projects and the key elements of EWN that are present through those different types of projects. And then it's also broken up by chapters that show, different projects in the different project features like dunes or riverine systems, wetlands or reefs, and you can quickly navigate to, the feature of interest or whatever catches your eye.
So the first couple of atlases had over 60 different projects highlighted. What's the plan for Atlas 3?
Well, we've had an outstanding response to our call for projects for Volume 3. And that call is closed at this point, but we've received around 100 submissions. But unfortunately, which has been wonderful because they're all great work and they all have multiple benefits. And there's a wide variety from the U.S. and around the world. However, in order to keep with our pattern from Volume 1 and Volume 2, we're gonna have to whittle our submissions down because we want this book to be able to be picked up and looked at. And so if we keep them all, it'll be too big. That said, it's been really encouraging to see the number of people doing the work for one, and then also interested in sharing and promoting.
So Atlas 1 and 2 are available on the Engineering with Nature website. When's Atlas 3 going to be available?
In spring of 2024, it'll be published.
And the other big thing that you're working on, and I've had the opportunity to contribute a little bit, is the next 5-year strategic plan, which is a big deal. Talk a little bit about that and when we can expect to see that one.
That's right. We do thankfully have a great team, including people like yourself that are vested in engineering with nature and understand what that means, what it means to engineer with nature, working on this project. But this is going to extend our vision to 2020-30. And it's like a roadmap in many instances. We want to both reflect our past accomplishments, which have been great and exciting, while also paving the way for the future. By having outside advisors contribute to this and making it a collaboratively, informed plan, we're inviting others to join with us in this. This isn't just a USACE plan. This is how do we engineer with nature more, and that's what we're aiming at.
And the strategic plan will be out in sometime 2024?
That's right. Also, I believe spring or mid-year 2024. Yes.
Excellent. Well, we've got it on our schedule, and we're certainly going to be talking about it on the EWN Podcast.
Absolutely. There'll be more to come.
Before I let you go, I know that you're working on a couple of longer-term projects, and you've got a really cool project that you've been working on with students. Can you talk a little bit about that? Give us a little hint.
Yes. We've had a neat opportunity to collaborate with a undergraduate student videography team from the University of Oklahoma. And they are working on a video documentary for Engineering with Nature.
That's cool. Yeah. That's something we've talked about for a long time. So what have they been doing?
It is, yes. Well, this summer specifically, the team got to visit the South Pacific Division in California, which, as you know, the South Pacific Division is an Engineering with Nature proving ground. And
yes, we had Brigadier General Gant on, and she talked about that. So
that's right.
I'm sure she's been very interested in this project.
She has. And in fact, the student team was able to get an interview with her as well for this project. So yeah, she was very supportive of both the Engineering with Nature, but also these student engagements as well.
Yes.
But they were able to gather footage while they were out there and conduct interviews focusing on wetlands and levee setbacks. They highlighted projects like the Hamilton Wetlands, the San Francisco Bay shoreline, and some others. We're hoping to get a variety of projects out of this effort. But ultimately, we want to be able to let people see what engineering with nature looks like in motion. So as the atlases did for the program, they're working on adding the motion to it. And we'll get to look at that in video. We'll have some smaller snippets, some like project profiles, as well as a couple of longer pieces that are specifically focused on the inland and coastal features independently.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. And then ultimately there's discussion about weaving that into a longer documentary style piece.
And so when are we going to see the fruits of these students' labor?
That will be more like the end of 2024. Yes. We don't have a hard date or release date, but you'll definitely know about it once we get there.
Great. Well, Courtney, thanks for coming and talking about some of the balls that you have in the air. I know that there's a lot of other things that you're doing from a communications point of view to really share the word about engineering with nature, the different projects, the different collaborators, highlight some of the interesting challenges that engineering with nature is tackling. So do keep us posted, and thanks for coming and joining us today.
Certainly. It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So Jeff, Courtney's been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to communicate about engineering with nature.
Yes, she has. And honestly, what a great job she does. And so grateful to have her as part of the team. I know she's probably so busy with trying to pull together the EWN Atlas and working to compile all of that information. And then we've got the EWN strategic plan, which I know she shared information about. And then on top of that, it's the network for engineering with nature and ensuring that the partners are all harmonized and moving out on a variety of different initiatives within the network. So just incredible the work that she's been doing for us.
She has a lot of balls in the air, and I think the Engineering with Nature program really depends on her to get the message out about all the work that's being done.
Exactly right.
So, Jeff, earlier this summer, I asked your colleague, Amanda Tritinger, who's the Deputy Program Manager for Engineering with Nature, to drop by, give us an update on some of the interesting opportunities that are developing in Southeast Asia. Listen in to our conversation. Hey, welcome back, Amanda.
Hey, Sarah. Good to be here.
The last time we talked was when we were talking to Courtney McKeechee from Ocean's Vision.
Yeah, I'm happy to be back on the EWN podcast, and I can't say enough how much I really enjoyed the opportunity to talk to Courtney McKeechee during season 6, episode 3, learn about all she's doing with Ocean Visions, and honestly just be all around inspired by her past, her vision, and what she has going on at Ocean's Decade.
She certainly was an inspiring guest. And boy, I got to say, we're getting a lot of people listening to that episode. It's just a terrific discussion. And we sure appreciate you suggesting that we have Courtney as guest. So let's get on to the business of today. You've recently done some interesting travel. Tell us about it.
Yeah, we did have quite an exciting opportunity. The Engineering with Nature program was asked by the USACE, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Pacific Ocean Division, to join them on a trip to Taiwan, where we were able to talk about the future of partnership, coastal and fluvial opportunities to engineer with nature, and really just do an information and technology exchange. The Taiwan Water Resource Agency has a lot of really cool projects in the ground. They've been monitoring, they've been doing a lot of research with local colleges to be at the forefront of the natural infrastructure game. So it was exciting to share what Engineering with Nature had going on, but also to learn a lot from what Taiwan's been doing in a very different climate than what I'm normally used to seeing. So it was a very exciting exchange.
Absolutely. So this was a landmark exchange, from what I understand. Tell us, what was involved? What did you do while you were in Taiwan?
Oh, we did so much. The first day, we did sort of a general exchange with the Taiwan Water Resource Agency, and we just kind of sat on two sides of a room and talked about what they had going on and what we had going on over at Engineering with Nature. The next day, we had a workshop where I shared the Engineering with Nature program, research, strategic communications, our implemented demonstration projects with about 300 audience participants. Burton Siddell was able to call in virtually and share a lot about our NBF guidelines. And then those local professors that I talked about, they shared some research they had going on.
That's a pretty big audience, Amanda.
Yeah. Oh, man. And we gave talks, but then we also had a panel discussion, and I got so much out of that panel discussion. It was Burton, myself, and the two professors, and the questions were as relevant as they are to us here in the U.S. It was everything from how do you communicate with stakeholders, the community, up into, what coefficient of drag do you use to represent vegetation in your model? It was really cool to really bond with, although it was a big audience, I felt like we were bonding with each of those participants really nicely.
Excellent. And you did some site visits as well.
We had so many site visits. We had 3 days of site visits. The first day we went to a local village where they had some floodplain issues, and we saw how they use natural infrastructure to kind of rebuild the floodplain there. And not only did they make this river that had been flooding during every rainy season beautiful, and they used some grade control structures to do that were 100% natural. They also talked to the community and said, what do you need here? And they planted trees that have now become crops for the locals. And there's a black goat farm, which I'd never seen a black goat. And then while we were there, 20 black goats came running by. But they also have concerts in the park there now. And the mayor will come out. And it's just kind of the perfect, social, environmental, economic feature that Engineering with Nature talks about all the time.
Sounds like a fantastic opportunity. And talk about some of the opportunities that you saw for incorporating nature-based solutions.
So that first visit was just south of Taipei, and then we were able to take the bullet train down to Chai County. And while we were there, we went to the Agua wetlands and saw what was kind of natural to the area. And then we also took a boat out to this large sandbar where there's a lot of littoral drift that's kind of eroding that sandbar. And that sandbar protects the Agua Park, the Agua Water Park. So it's protecting all of these natural features. Mm-hmm. It's protecting all this natural wetland, this bird habitat. And while we were out on that sandbar, we talked about where this erosion is coming from. Is it waves? Is it the currents? And we talked about how they could use natural features to kind of combat that erosion. Because that sandbar is protecting not only the wetlands, but the whole community behind it. And what's really cool is that community depends a lot on the oyster farming there. So they have a lot of these rafts that are just collecting these milk oysters, which, sidebar, are delicious. And so they have all of these shells, these oyster shells, and they have all these rafts that are decommissioned after they've kind of fallen apart. So they have a lot of materials right there next to the sandbar. So we talked about how they could build a kind of natural breakwater using those materials. And they'd already been doing some sand trapping with those materials. So it wasn't hard for us to just take the next step and look at where they could build this feature and how they could consider the currents and the hydrodynamics to best protect that sandbar.
Oh, that's really neat. I understand that the Engineering with Nature program has other opportunities coming up in Southeast Asia soon. Yeah,
so we made friends over there, and the Taiwan Water Resource Agency was just, I cannot say this enough, was just the most welcoming group of people, and they welcomed us back. So Burton was only able to attend virtually. They said, come on back for our International Water Week. So in October, Burton Siddell is going to head over and give a presentation during the Taiwan International Water Week.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, it sounds like some interesting opportunities, interesting partnership opportunities coming up, some interesting things we could talk about on future podcasts. Keep us posted, Amanda, and let us know when it's time to explore these more fully.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really looking forward to it. And through POD, we've been involved a lot more recently with Southeast Asia. And Burton, Jeff King, and I have all been on the phone late hours talking about future partnerships with the Japanese, with Vietnam, how they can use these nature-based solutions that we've been doing so much research into to help solve their very vastly different problems. And it's really exciting. The world is a big place, and what seems like a problem can be its own solution through the use of natural infrastructure and understanding the environment around us. So many future activities coming up, and I will, of course, keep you in the loop, Sarah.
Excellent. And it's so great to see the Engineering with Nature program getting out and sharing what you've learned, but also learning from people in other areas. That's the objective, right?
Oh, yes. My brain was full coming back from Taiwan. I learned so much. People are very creative, and it's exciting to see how humans not only live next to nature, but really embrace it.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for checking in with us, Amanda. And we will certainly have you and Burton come and talk to us more as these opportunities in Southeast Asia develop.
We look forward to it.
Wow, Sarah, great conversation with Amanda there. A lot of really interesting things that she's been taking on as part of the Engineering with Nature program and serving as the assistant program manager. I have been really impressed with the work that's been happening in Southeast Asia, and certainly with her engagements with the Taiwanese government and seeing where that could go and many of the opportunities for future conversations. And that's what Amanda has been doing. I should probably point out that Burton Siddell has recently returned from a trip to Australia, where he had a chance to participate in 2 technical exchanges on behalf of the EWN program. And of course, we'll want to have Burton and Amanda on to do a special episode on interest in EWN and the opportunities for collaboration that are coming together in Southeast Asia.
I think we should do that after they get back from their trip this fall.
That's right. Everybody's on the road right now, Sarah. It's just
everybody's
incredible.
on the road. So, Jeff, we've got a couple of other news items to share. First, we've got an update on the first ever National Nature Assessment, which is being undertaken in the United States. I think you'll recall that we had Heather Tallis from the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy join us for Season 5, Episode 3. She was talking about the design of the Natural Nature Assessment. She was the acting director of the initiative. Well, over the summer, I had the opportunity to speak with Phil Levin from the University of Washington, and Phil has been appointed by the Biden administration in April as the director of the National Nature Assessment.
Well, that's wonderful that you had that conversation, and the National Nature Assessment is such an important initiative. I know Heather and the U.S. Global Change Research Program's leadership team, they really want to hear from as many people as possible to really understand how people across the U.S. define nature, and perhaps more importantly, how they value it. As Heather said in that episode, they want to make sure that the National Nature Assessment is used to inspire, that the final report will be critical to decision-making, and in fact will be a critical decision-making tool. So getting input and perspective from many people with different points of view actually is very essential.
Absolutely. So the initial request for information that Heather talked about was completed at the end of March. Then Phil started his role in April, and he's been reviewing all that input. Plus, he's been conducting listening sessions with a number of different groups. He told me about meeting with tribal nations, conservation groups, loggers, ranchers, urban groups, and and many, many others.
Wow. Yeah. So it sounds like he's got his work cut out for him too. And that's a large number of organizations, individuals to be talking with. And so I'm kind of curious, what did he say? I mean, what's next for Phil?
Well, he's putting together a prospectus on what he's learned so far, which he'll be sharing with the 14 federal entities that are participating in the U.S. Global Change Research Program. And then after that, there'll be a call for authors to help write the NNA, which has a 2026 deadline. And I should say that Phil emphasized they're going to be looking for authors with a broad range of backgrounds, from those with traditional expertise to scientists from multiple disciplines to students.
How about that? Well, it will be very interesting to see how the National Nature Assessment develops. And we'll have to ask Phil to join us as a guest to talk more about what he's learning and also how the National Nature Assessment is evolving.
Indeed. Hey, I'm already ahead of you on that, Jeff. I've already invited him.
Well, Sarah, you're ahead of me on a lot of different things. So that really isn't surprising. And it certainly would be great, absolutely great to have Phil back on. And on another topic, I believe you also talked with our previous podcast guest, Koch and Derek over the summer.
Yes, I did. Many of our listeners will remember Koch Kornvarikholm, or Koch as she's known, and Derek Hefferlin, who were our guests on Season 4, Episode 10 podcast, which incidentally is one of our top 2 most downloaded episodes of all times. People love that episode. Koch is the founder of the Bangkok-based landscape architecture company called Land Process. Derek and his colleagues at the Sam Fox School of Design and Visual Arts have been hosting Koch's residency, sponsored by the Pulitzer Arts Foundation, which wraps up really shortly.
That has been such an interesting engagement, and I really appreciated the opportunity to have them on and learn about what was the effort that they were going to be pursuing, and just really incredible the work that's happening for both of them, frankly. And so I'm just kind of curious now, did they give you any insight into what Koch worked on as the designer in residence and maybe how she's wrapping up her project?
Well, only a few hints, Jeff. Over the past year, she taught in the Master of Landscape and Architecture and Master of Urban Design programs, where she was really exploring issues of climate change, water-based urbanism, and community-engaged design with the students. She also led public meetings with academics, local municipal leaders, designers, youth, and many others in St. Louis to really develop a common understanding and platform to discuss climate change-related issues. So Koch hinted that she's been making a video of the interviews that she's been conducting with this broad range of stakeholders, including with youth and teenagers, about their experiences of climate change and their thoughts on solutions. So I'm sure that she's going to talk about that, and she'll also give us some interesting insights into her year-long work in St. Louis.
Well, they certainly sounded like 2 very busy people, and that is a lot to be able to accomplish. And this is very interesting about the video too. I'm sort of excited to hear more about that. So it'll be really interesting to have her on, hear more what she was working on while in residence. Sounds like as you might expect, Koch is so creative, and her work with landscape architecture is so inspiring. And I'd also really love to hear more on her perspective on the big takeaways from her residency too.
Absolutely. And the other big news is that Derek's book that he had mentioned, it's entitled Way Beyond Bigness, The Need for Watershed Architecture. It's been available since August. And I have to tell you, it's a fabulous book. Derek is looking at water-based infrastructure challenges across the Mekong, Mississippi, and Rhine River basins. And at the end of the book, he provides a design research framework for multidisciplinary strategies across river basins of multiple scales, certainly of interest to the EWN program.
That's right. Well, those are very big systems, and I'll be very curious to see how all 3 are compared and contrasted, and certainly looking forward to reading the book and talking more with Derek when he and Koch are back on to join us for another episode.
They'll be back. So, Jeff, before we wrap up, do you want to give the listeners a little bit of a hint about what's coming up in Season 6, Episode 6, which airs September 27th?
Well, I absolutely would love to tell them a little bit about what we are doing and hope they will come back and join us for that episode. We're really going to be talking about one of the more unique collaborations that is currently underway within the program. This one is to protect and restore an island off the shores of the state of Maine and New Brunswick, Canada. It is a very significant and historic site. A lot of history associated with this particular island, history for Canada, the United States, France, and also the Passamaquoddy Nation. And so we're going to be talking about this interesting collaboration to apply nature-based solutions to protect and preserve the heritage of St. Croix Island.
Well, Jeff, it's just such an amazing story with an interesting chapter that started in 1604. And it's so well told by our guests. I do hope our listeners tune in.
Well, I do too. And it's a wonderful story. And we've got Donald Soktoma with the Passamaquoddy Nation. We've got Becky Colwill from the National Park Service. And then Amy Hunt with EA Engineering, Science, and Technology. I must say, I learned so much in talking with these three. And it's fascinating, really. So, for example, with Donald Soktoma and his perspective and insights and learning more about the Passamaquoddy Nation. And I certainly will never forget, his thoughts and ideas and sort of having a perspective that goes well beyond 1604 to talk about more of what the Passamaquoddy Nation was doing there in this region during a time long before European explorers actually came to the island. So really fascinating and just so grateful to our guests for being with us.
Absolutely. So I hope that our listeners will tune in. It's just a terrific story. Jeff, there's so much more we could talk about. It's been a super busy time for the Engineering with Nature program. And I know you and the Engineering with Nature team have a lot planned for the months ahead.
You're right, Sarah. It's been incredibly busy, and it looks like it's going to be that way for a very long time. And that is a very good thing given the circumstances and the climate change that we have all been experiencing. It really is challenging, and it is motivation for our EWN colleagues and collaborators to be innovative, to be thinking about all of the scenarios that we currently face, what we will face, and to be conducting research and field work on a range of projects that can help mitigate the impacts of climate change. We want to be in a position to be able to help communities adapt and become more resilient. And I'm really looking forward to sharing some of these truly groundbreaking projects, the work that's underway on future episodes of the EWN podcast.
There's so much to talk about and so many podcast opportunities. And Jeff, I want to close with some good news. The EWN podcast has surpassed 40,000 downloads. That's a big milestone for us.
It certainly is, Sarah. And I'm just so grateful for everybody that has been listening to the podcast, and the feedback that we get is just so encouraging and so very appreciated. And it is worth celebrating. And we want to be able to continue to be in a position to share these wonderful stories and offer the good news in terms of the people and their work and what is happening in this space to create resiliency and really help to make forward progress.
Well, we've got people listening around the world. I hope that we can surpass 50,000 downloads in the next few months. It's a goal. And Jeff, I have to say, as we wrap up, we've got a really great lineup to the end of season 6, and we're already planning for season 7, which will kick off next year.
Sarah, I am so excited and always very grateful to you for all that you do to make this such a wonderful opportunity for all of us and our listeners and our guests. And I don't think we're going to run out of interesting things to share with our listeners. We have so many great stories to share, and we're going to keep doing that.
Indeed, we will. And to all of you, thank you so much for listening. If you have any comments about this episode or anything we're working on in the Engineering with Nature program, please give us a call or drop us a note. Details are on the EWN website. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and we hope you'll join us again when we talk about engineering with nature.
You've been listening to the EWN Podcast, developed by Sarah Thorne and Jeff King, National Lead, Engineering with Nature Initiative, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Now, for more information, you can visit our website, engineeringwithnature.org. The EWN Podcast is produced by iContact Productions for the Engineering with Nature program within the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I'm Dave Trafford.